My name is Alex, and I believe Rock Bottom has a basement. I found it 15 years ago on what should have been just another Thursday night at Meridian Technologies. I was 19, working the night shift as a janitor to put myself through community college. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid above minimum wage, and the hours meant I could attend classes during the day. My plan was simple: get my associate's degree, transfer to a state university, and escape the cycle of poverty that had defined my family for generations. That Thursday night, I was mopping the hallway outside the main conference room when the doors suddenly burst open. The executive team spilled out, their meeting apparently running late. I pressed myself against the wall, mop in hand, trying to become invisible as they passed. But Richard Sterling, the CEO, stopped when he saw me. He was in his 50s, tall and imposing in his tailored suit, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money a day in your life. "Well, look who's still here," he said, his voice carrying down the hallway. The other executives stopped, turning to see what had caught their boss's attention. I nodded politely. "Just finishing up, sir." Sterling's eyes narrowed, a smirk playing at his lips. "How long have you been pushing that mop around here, kid?" "About 8 months, sir." He chuckled, looking back at his colleagues. 8 months. You know, I started in the mailroom when I was your age. Within a year, I was in sales. 2 years after that, junior management. He turned back to me. "What's your plan? Still going to that community college?" I straightened my shoulders slightly. "Yes, sir. Business administration. I'm hoping to transfer to state next fall." The laugh that erupted from Sterling made my stomach drop. It wasn't just mockery. It was dismissal. The kind that says, "You're not even worth taking seriously." "Business administration," he repeated as if I'd said I was studying unicorn farming. "Listen, kid, let me save you some time and money. Some people are meant to lead, and some are meant to clean up after the leaders. Nothing wrong with knowing your place." My cheeks burned as several of the executives chuckled. "You know what they say," Sterling continued, warming to his audience. "Aim for the stars and you might hit the moon. But in your case," he gestured to my mop, "I think you've already found your calling." One of the women in the group, the COO, I later learned, shifted uncomfortably. "Richard, we should get going. The reservation's for 8. But Sterling wasn't done. He stepped closer to me, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "Here's some free business advice from someone who actually knows something about it. You'll always be on mop duty, kid. The sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be." He clapped me on the shoulder as if he'd done me a favor and then walked away, the rest of the executive team trailing behind him. A few gave me sympathetic glances, but not one of them said a word in my defense. I stood there clutching my mop, my entire body burning with humiliation and rage. In that moment, something crystallized inside me, a determination so fierce it almost scared me. I wasn't just angry at Sterling. I was angry at a system that made people like him believe they could crush someone's dreams and walk away laughing. That night, I didn't finish mopping. I put my cleaning supplies away, clocked out, and walked to my car, a beat-up Honda Civic with more rust than paint. Sitting in the driver's seat, I made myself a promise. Someday, somehow, I would prove Richard Sterling wrong, and I would make damn sure he knew it. I didn't quit my job the next day. I couldn't afford to, but my approach to everything changed. I started paying attention to how Meridian Technologies operated, not just the floors I cleaned, but the business itself. I listened to conversations as executives worked late. I read memos left on desks and reports left in printers. I became a silent student of the company that employed me. 6 months later, I noticed something concerning in some financial projections someone had left out. Meridian was heavily investing in a technology that, from everything I'd learned in my business classes, seemed destined to become obsolete. I debated saying something for days. Finally, I wrote an anonymous note detailing my concerns and left it on the CFO's desk during my shift. 2 weeks later, Meridian announced they were changing their investment strategy. I never got credit, but I didn't need it. I knew. Over the next year, I left 3 more anonymous notes about potential improvements or concerns. 2 of them led to actual changes in company policy. It was a small victory, but it fueled me. I wasn't just a janitor, I was a shadow analyst, learning the business from the ground up. When I finally transferred to State University, I kept my job at Meridian, switching to weekend shifts. My class schedule was brutal, my sleep schedule worse, but every time I felt like giving up, I remembered Sterling's smug face. 4 years later, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in business, with a minor in computer science. I'd also managed to save enough for a small investment account, carefully growing it using the knowledge I'd gained both in class and on the job. The day after graduation, I quit Meridian. Sterling had been promoted to chairman of the board by then, but the new CEO was cut from the same cloth. Nobody even remembered the janitor who'd been there for nearly 6 years. I walked out without fanfare, just another invisible worker, leaving for another invisible job. Except I didn't get another janitorial position. Instead, I landed an entry-level analyst job at a venture capital firm. The pay was barely more than I'd made as a janitor, but the opportunity was priceless. For the first time, I was putting my education to work, officially. I threw myself into learning everything I could about investing, market trends, and emerging technologies. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, drove the same old Honda, and put almost every spare dollar into investments. Some nights I'd wake up in a cold sweat, worried I was chasing an impossible dream. But then I'd remember Sterling's words, "You'll always be on mop duty," and the fire would reignite. 3 years at the VC firm gave me enough credibility and connections to move to a larger investment company. 2 years after that, I was heading my own division, with a particular focus on tech companies in trouble. Businesses with good foundations but poor leadership. By the time I was 30, I had made my first $1 million. It wasn't from a salary. It was from smart investments, calculated risks, and an almost obsessive work ethic. I bought a modest house, replaced my dying Honda with a sensible Subaru, and continued living well below my means. When I was 32, I started my own investment firm with 2 partners I trusted. We specialized in turning around struggling tech companies, something I had become particularly skilled at. My years as a janitor had taught me that the people at the bottom often had the clearest view of a company's problems. Success bred success. By 35, I was worth over $20 million. My firm had a reputation for finding diamonds in the rough, companies that just needed the right leadership to shine. It was around that time that I first heard Meridian Technologies was in trouble. I wasn't surprised. They'd continued to make the same mistakes. Arrogance at the top, ignoring innovation, treating their workers as disposable. Richard Sterling was still chairman, though he'd brought in a series of CEOs over the years, each one failing to turn the company around. Their stock had plummeted, and rumors of bankruptcy were swirling. I watched for 6 months as Meridian's situation worsened. Then, working through multiple shell companies to hide my identity, I began quietly buying up their devalued stock. It took another year of careful maneuvering, but eventually, my firm controlled enough shares to make a move. The day my team and I walked into Meridian's headquarters for the first time as its new majority owners was surreal. The building was the same, but smaller than I remembered. The lobby had the same marble floors I used to mop, though they looked dingier now. We were escorted to the boardroom where the executive team waited nervously. They didn't know who had bought their company yet, only that new ownership was taking over today. I paused outside the boardroom door, straightening my custom-made suit and taking a deep breath. One of my partners squeezed my shoulder. "You've been waiting 15 years for this," she said. "Enjoy it." I nodded, composed myself, and pushed open the door. The boardroom fell silent as we entered. 10 people sat around the large table, with Richard Sterling at the head. He had aged considerably, his hair now fully silver, lines etched deeply around his mouth and eyes. But the arrogant set of his shoulders was exactly the same. "Good morning," I said, setting my briefcase on the table. "Thank you all for meeting with us today." Sterling stood, extending his hand. "Richard Sterling, chairman of the board. And you are?" I took his hand, meeting his gaze directly. "Alexander Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Partners. But you might remember me better as the kid with the mop." His handshake faltered, confusion crossing his face, then slow recognition. His complexion paled as the implications sank in. That's not possible," he stammered. I smiled, releasing his hand. "And yet, here we are." For the next hour, my team outlined our plans for restructuring Meridian. We were keeping most of the employees but replacing the executive team starting today. Throughout the presentation, Sterling sat in stunned silence, occasionally opening his mouth to object, then thinking better of it. When we finished, I asked the other executives to give us the room. They filed out quietly, leaving me alone with Sterling. "You can't do this," he said finally, finding his voice. "I built this company." "And then you ran it into the ground," I replied, taking a seat across from him. "Your leadership has cost shareholders millions. The board has no confidence in you anymore. You're done." He leaned forward, desperation in his eyes. "Look, whatever grudge you're holding—" "This isn't about a grudge," I cut him off. "This is business. Meridian has potential, but not with you at the helm." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single piece of paper, his termination letter. I slid it across the table, watching as he stared at it in disbelief. "Your employment has been terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to clean out your office." I stood, buttoning my jacket. "Now I suggest you get started. There's a lot to mop up." The look on his face in that moment was worth every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt I'd experienced over the past 15 years. As I turned to leave, he called after me, "You think you've won? You have no idea what you're getting into. This company will eat you alive." I paused at the door, looking back at him, a bitter old man who couldn't accept that his time was over. "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll know my place." I walked out, closing the door on Sterling and 15 years of being underestimated. The next few months were challenging. Turning around a company like Meridian required more than just removing bad leadership. It meant changing the entire culture. I spent time with employees at all levels, listening to their concerns and ideas. Many were surprised to find the new owner mopping his own coffee spill or helping the maintenance staff fix a broken door. When people asked about my background, I was honest. Word soon spread that the janitor had returned as the boss, and it changed something fundamental in how the employees viewed both me and their own potential within the company. A year later, Meridian's stock had doubled. 2 years after that, we'd expanded into 3 new markets and quadrupled our workforce. The company that Sterling had nearly destroyed was now thriving. Sometimes, late at night when the offices are empty, I walk the halls with a strange sense of déjà vu. I see my younger self pushing that mop, burning with humiliation and determination. If I could go back and tell that kid what was coming, would I? Probably not. It was Sterling's cruelty that drove me, that forced me to prove him wrong in the most definitive way possible. I heard Sterling tried to start a consulting business after leaving Meridian, but it failed within a year. Last I heard, he was living in a condo in Florida, his reputation in the business world irreparably damaged. As for me, I keep a mop in my office closet, not as a trophy or a reminder of revenge, but as a symbol of where I started and what I learned along the way. That mop taught me more about business than my degree ever did. It showed me that the view from the bottom gives you perspective that those at the top often lack. Every new executive hire at Meridian now spends their first week working alongside our maintenance staff. Some complain, but most come to understand what I'm trying to teach them. Respect for every position, appreciation for every contribution, and the knowledge that leadership isn't about a title. It's about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. Richard Sterling was right about one thing: some people are meant to lead and some are meant to clean up. He just had no idea which category I would ultimately fall into. So if you're out there pushing a mop, wearing a name tag, or doing any job that makes people look right through you, remember my story. Remember that today's humiliation can become tomorrow's motivation. Remember that the person mocking your dreams has no power to stop you from achieving them. And remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong, it's replacing them entirely.